I'm going to start with some brief 10-second clips of each of these 8 artists, and then ask the simple question above.
In between worlds, in between places.
Its most difficult is sleeping time.
Just self, for instance, which is the frozen head made from my own blood.
So it was a way of trying to understand the forces behind something.
What do all these artists and their artworks have in common? And some of these are the most successful artists in the world. In cybernetic existentialism, I argue that they're all drawing upon the themes and ideas of 2 distinct yet interrelated fields: the universal science of cybernetics and the philosophy of existentialism. Now, Gregory Bateson is the great ecologist of cybernetics. He was really involved in ecologies and new ways of looking at ecology through cybernetics. He observed that the discipline of cybernetics is not essentially about, quote, exchanging information across lines of discipline, but in discovering patterns common to many disciplines. Now, my researchers adopted his line of thought to join the dots between cybernetics and the philosophy of existentialism. I then interconnect their 2 themes with 50 case studies from contemporary art. While some may consider cybernetics and existentialist philosophy outdated or defunct, I contend that since the 1960s, contemporary artists have been perennially exploring and encapsulating their paradigms and themes. I propose a theory and a new analytical method where the ideas of the 2 fields are melded together to produce a new looking glass, a bifocal lens through which to peer. It's a novel lens with which to critically analyse and deconstruct artworks and cultural moments. 2 old paradigms are conjoined to provide a fresh perspective and are reanimated to shed new light on prevalent themes within art, socio-cultural and ecological practices. So, the research offers the first detailed comparison between cybernetics and existentialism. No one has done this before. Maybe no one felt it was worth doing, but I do. Now, it reveals surprising commonalities, and these are some of them. So feedback loops and negative entropy, for example, are not only central tenets of cybernetics, but also of existentialism. Autonomy and interactivity equally unite both fields. They're key concerns. Each field is also visionary and forward-looking in seeking radical change and transformations, including ecological. Now, both disciplines explored artistic endeavours. So, for example, in existentialism, here's works of Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, who were equally renowned for their plays and their novels as they were for their philosophical works. Cybernetic art became a major phenomenon in the 1960s, with artists including Nam June Paik here, and also there was a landmark exhibition called Cybernetic Serendipity, the Computer and the Arts. It brought together over 300 artists and engineers to present a history of cybernetics, and it used a series of interactive exhibits, robots and autonomous art-making machines. It was one of the most acclaimed exhibitions of the 1960s, touring from London's ICA to the US, and it had a major influence on artistic practices thereafter. But not only do these fields share common concerns, their historical journeys are also contiguous. They were both born in the 1940s. They rose to prominence in the 1950s, and in the 1960s they reached height of real fame. Both captured the public and popular imagination, not just an academic audience, making their leaders here household names not only in their native countries but around the world. Cybernetics at the time was seized upon as a magic key to explain everything from what happened in World War II to what the scientific future held in store. Jean-Paul Sartre was a hugely famous and indeed infamous public celebrity. His funeral procession in 1980 was nationally televised and attended by 50,000 people. But while Sartre's calls to assert freedom by actively resisting rules and social conformity had captured the countercultural imagination of the late 1960s, it thereafter lost its fervour and relevance in the more politically conservative times that followed it. Meanwhile, cybernetics was overtaken by new ideas, emphases, and vocabularies. In the 1970s, what was previously called the cybernetic age suddenly became transformed into the information age. In the 1990s, post-human theory remediated cybernetics ideas once again to recast them in another form. This quote from Catherine Hales, this is the preeminent book on post-human theory. Almost every page of Catherine Hales' famous book uses the word cybernetics at some point. So I'm looking at two movements that really have declined and largely fallen out of view 50 years ago. I'm going to start with a kind of 101 introduction before I go on to my main theory and discourse. Cybernetics is a transdisciplinary systems science developed by writers including these. In simple terms, it's a science of responsive systems as opposed to purely mechanical ones. And it's thus applicable to a wide range of areas from computing to psychology, sociology, and biology. The human body is a classic cybernetic system as it's responsive. It reacts to things to protect itself. When we're too hot, we sweat to cool down. Our bodies regulate insulin to adjust our sugar levels, and self-heals our cuts and bruises. So it's a cybernetic machine. We can also apply cybernetic principles to the study of organizations and societies, how they develop or how they adapt to threats and dangers. So cybernetic systems are thus by nature ecological, holistically responding to changes in their internal or external environments to protect themselves. Existentialism is a branch of philosophy formulated by these thinkers, although not every one of them readily accepted the label. Existentialism emphasizes fundamental conflicts in the nature of human being, including an equally strong experience of nothingness and anticipation of being towards death. We are thereby confronted continually with choices about how to act in order to create meaning in the way we live. So it is a very didactic philosophy about saying how we should live. The philosophy urges rejection of social conditioning so as to make individual freedom and responsibility paramount. It advocates we continually create and recreate our own identities through authentic actions and relationships. It also emphasizes how, in the face of nothingness, perpetual choices and recognition of our absolute freedom, we experience understandable feelings of anxiety, isolation, angst, and nausea. The emergence of the distinct field of existentialism followed the horrors of the Second World War. And I argue that today we are actually experiencing a different but parallel period of existential crisis and angst. And that's why we see so much of it in art, which I'll move on to shortly. It has arisen following new political and ecological fears, as well as an amplified sense of psychological alienation and separation. This has been brought about in part by the migration of human communication into technological platforms. There is also a renewed longing for the individual to emerge out of the collective, to assert itself. War in the 1940s spawned existentialist philosophy and its message that life was full of anxiety and uncertainty. I think similar anxieties intensify today as wars reappear, and there are trepidations ranging from the global warming crisis to the politics of fundamentalism, intolerance, and the extreme. Meanwhile, social science research indicates growing numbers of young people succumbing to depression, self-harm, and suicide. So the despairing side of the philosophy has reanimated itself. So some of the philosophy is quite negative, some is positive. Okay, I'm going to start to look at some case studies that I feel encapsulate the ideas of both cybernetics and existentialism simultaneously. I'll begin with one that deals explicitly with ecological concerns. The Nasher Prize in 2017 was won by Pierre Huyghe. He sounded more cybernetician than artist when describing his installation After a Life Ahead. He spoke of creating evolutionary algorithms and self-organizing systems that continually grow, evolve, and shift. Within an excavated former ice rink, his systems include geometric panels in the roof that open and close to let in sun, wind, or rain. An incubator contains human cancer cells that grow and multiply according to the amount of CO2 they are fed by the breathing of the visitors. We watch real-time representations of the cancer cells splitting and mutating using an augmented reality app. The work is a characteristic example of what I term cybernetic existentialism in contemporary art, where the artist conceives a responsive and evolving cybernetic system in order to express deep existential concerns, in this case around the fragility of both human life and our planet's environment. Now, Huyghe is one of contemporary art's leading figures today. But I want to go back in time now to one of the most famous artists of the 1950s and 60s, Robert Rauschenberg, and an iconic work of his from 1953. The story goes that a then young and unknown Robert Rauschenberg turned up unannounced on the doorstep of William de Kooning. He asked him for a drawing and explained that he would erase it. The already famous de Kooning obliged the young pretender with a sketch of a group of women done in ink, charcoal, and graphite. Rauschenberg then took 2 months and many erasers to rub out the image. And some faint marks, smudges, and grease marks and so on remain in his famous erased de Kooning drawing, 1953. Now, like the best conceptual artworks, when first exhibited, it caused huge controversy and outrage. How could this be art? People asked. But it became an iconic work and a historic moment that changed the face of art by redefining its limits. If we read it through cybernetics, Rauschenberg performed a type of classic negative feedback loop to achieve homeostasis and to return the picture to its original state, a blank sheet of paper. Now, this is in the same way that a thermostat operates, another classic cybernetic system, a thermostat, to bring the temperature back to its desired temperature, back to its original reference value. Okay, at the same time, this classic work resonates with all the vibrations of existentialism. It conjures ideas and poses questions around rebellion, authenticity, the absurd, the uncanny, identity as palimpsest, absence and presence, and nothingness's relationship to being. Interestingly, in talking about the work, Rauschenberg himself echoed the existentialist view on nothingness. It's not a negation, he said, it's a celebration. The piece broke Christie's auction record in 2019, selling for $89 million US. Many people associate cybernetics first and foremost with high technologies, and cyborg artist Stelarc is, for me, a quintessential cybernetic existentialist. He's like an embodiment of science fiction, inscribing the language of cybernetics and robotics onto his body. He employs prosthetic technologies in existential acts of performance. Stelarc is as uncompromising as any existentialist, with an absolute commitment to progressive self-creation and going beyond his limits. Stelarc conceives his body as an evolutionary cybernetic system and emphasizes that the human condition is not fixed. It's a constantly metamorphosing one. Now, if you read existentialism, it says exactly the same thing. It's fascinating to draw out these similarities and close correspondences. My case studies include numerous artists who explore non-technological forms of cybernetics, including sociological. Anne Imhof's Faust is a classic example, the Golden Lion winner of the 2017 Venice Biennale. Visitors walk around transparent floors while below and around them a socio-cybernetic system of actions, interactions, and causal feedback loops unfold between humans, dogs, and the installation environment. Faust operates within its own ecology of action, reaction, feedback, and correction. It creates a world and an evolving ecosystem between performers, audiences, and animals within terranean prisons and subterranean infrastructures. Imhof's previous work was entitled Angst, that quintessential existentialist theme, and her moody-looking performers are full of it, looking like models from central casting for a 1960s existentialist movie. They're distracted, alienated. One reviewer called the piece a masterpiece of modern-day angst. Claude Shannon created this cybernetic artwork, The Ultimate Machine, in 1952. It performs a classic negative feedback loop and the simplest of cybernetic tasks, responding to an input on with the output off. This 0 or 1 binary is used to equal effect in Martin Creed's work number 227, The Lights Going On and Off. The title tells it all. Within an empty gallery, the lights go on and off every 5 seconds. Like Shannon's machine, Creed's is a minimalist and Dadaist work, but opens up large metaphysical ideas, compressing happiness and anxiety within a single gesture. The fact it won the coveted Turner Prize in the year 2000 is not only indicative of its conceptual panache, but also its currency. It captured a millennium-turn zeitgeist, suddenly reconsidering the significance of being and nothingness. In Jean-Paul Sartre's iconic book, The Existentialist Bible, he argues the importance of confronting and embracing nothingness and impending doom, what he calls being towards death. This should be an urgent wake-up call, says Sartre, to live lives meaningfully and authentically and to break rules and assert individual freedom. 5 years later, Norbert Wiener's book, Cybernetics, gave another startling wake-up call, reminding us of boundary-breaking ways of communication and control and of the close similarities between humans and machine. Anish Kapoor's acclaimed Dissension uses a proto-cybernetic system to create a swirling, self-consuming vortex. In a 16-foot diameter hole, a perpetual spiral of jet black water spills into itself like a giant, all-consuming plug hole into the unknown. It vividly conjures existentialism's concerns with nothingness, the abyss, and being towards death. It brings to mind one of Norbert Wiener's analogies of cybernetics, of humans as whirlpools, when describing how our body tissues regenerate continually in a constant state of becoming. Becoming is also a central tenet of existentialism. He says, quote, "We are whirlpools in a river of ever-flowing water. We are not stuff that abide, but patterns that perpetuate themselves." In Chinese artists Sun Huan and Peng Yu's Angel, a hyper-realistic life-size figure face down on the ground, apparently dead. From her back sprout large, featherless chicken wings, wholly ineffective for flight. The image is simultaneously grotesque and beautiful, humorous and harrowing. Sun Huan and Peng Yu's One or All is a sculpture made of human bone ash. From an existentialist viewpoint, the significance of transforming the real bones of numerous dead humans into a towering stick of chalk is that it perpetually writes. We are free to write our own stories, rules, and fates, and our presence can endure even after death. Peng sees the work as a respectful tribute to the lives of the people whose mortal remains it contains, as a piece filled with hope and memories, with a powerful presence offering resistance against forgetting those who have passed on. In their controversial performance, Body Link, Sun Huan and Peng Yu are physically connected to the cadavers of two conjoined babies through an intravenous drip, with the dead children receiving blood into their systems. Performed in anticipation of their marriage, the artists reflect that it symbolizes two people integrating with one another, their blood merged. They see it as having, quote, a healing effect, where death is seen as calm and peaceful, not frightening. Sun Huan and Peng Yu use existentialism's paradigm of being towards death and combine them with very advanced cybernetic systems using recursive feedback loops. Can't Help Myself is an industrial robot with visual recognition sensors. It surveys its acrylic-walled room and reacts to when the blood-like liquid begins to come near the wall. The arm then descends to shovel the liquid back to the center and contain it. The artist programmed the arm to try to humanize it as a life form, with 32 movements including scratch and itch, bow and shake, and ass shake. It is darkly humorous in its absurd, obsessive behaviour to guard its borders, and critics have pointed to its underlying Chinese political messages around surveillance, violence, and migration controls. I now want to move to some theatrical works, and we'll see that many focus on the ever-evolving ecology and relationship between humans and machines. The use of robots as replacement for human performers thrived around the millennium, 24 years ago. And we'll start with an example from then where machines entirely take the place of any human performers. This is an ecological fable around pollution and overconsumption and their threats to humans and the planet. And as you'll see, it ends with the symbolic death of a bloated, overfed human who cannot breathe and is asphyxiated in a giant plastic bag. 60 robots, some small, some as tall as 20 feet high, emerge from an inflatable landscape. Some are powerful and godlike figures, some are hybrid creatures such as dog monkeys, and others are comic and dysfunctional caricatures of humans. The robots appear and disappear, interact, and play percussion symphonies together. This robot rolls over and over again and again, continually trying but always failing to stand up. Okay, we'll start to come a little more up to date. Robots are increasingly taking center stage. In Japan in particular, android actors are being developed that are becoming ever more realistic and kind of creepy.
人間に代わってじゃないかもしれないですね。演劇の世界にロボットという新しい種類の登場人物が出てきたんでしょうね。
In the work of groups such as 1927, theatre sets create dazzling cybernetic and kinetic effects. The media enmeshes the performers who act out existentially themed narratives. There's a celebration of illusion and digital spectacle. The actors are immersed within or consumed by the digital projections, and they interact with animated characters and fantastical worlds. The group create original theatre works, but they also collaborate with opera companies, placing the singers within ever-changing and kaleidoscopic worlds. Many theatre companies are also using technology to examine its negative consequences. Using media to critique media, they highlight technology's roles in areas such as political manipulation and social alienation. The Builders Association also enmesh their performers within the media using projection screens in front of and behind the actors. Their show Supervision offers a critique of data valence, surveillance of people's data. Its characters are dysfunctional, technologically addicted. They're trapped within an unreal world, the walls of their houses accumulating endless personal data. In one scene, an Indian traveller becomes increasingly dehumanised as he's interrogated by a passport control officer. Bureaucratic data projections consume him. His identity becomes defined not by his human presence, but the body of personal data that accumulates all around him.
Okay. Let me see, are you traveling alone?
Yes.
Then why did you order a king-size bed for your hotel room?
I ordered a king-size bed because I have sciatica.
Ooh, sciatica. So you're not working out of Dubuque anymore?
I have never worked in Dubuque. I would like that taken off my record.
You're requesting a change in your record?
No, I mean...
No, that's good. Hold on, I gotta put a note down.
So, while embracing cyber technologies aesthetically, the Builders Association continually question, critique and challenge its socio-political impact and their implications.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, do you want me to?
Yes, I do. But you know, actually, I'm going to be out of town next week, so a little tight.
Well, I could come another week, whatever's convenient.
Yeah, Helen.
What? You don't want me to come?
I do. I mean that. I want you to come. But it's just that it's kind of a big commitment, don't you think?
What is?
Being in the same city.
That's a big commitment.
Existentialist philosophy is full of discussions of the uncanny, and its German translation Unheimlich is the title of this work that I co-created with Paul Sermon and other collaborators. The great cybernetic art pioneer Roy Ascott once famously asked whether there is love in the telematic embrace. Telematics is about bringing people together from remote locations. So this installation suggests that the answer is definitely yes. It brings together two female actors in London with conference delegates from the SIGGRAPH Computer Conference in the USA.
You've got a firm handshake.
Where are you?
Well, this is a road we travel down often.
We live somewhere up there. Yeah. But we're going down there. Perhaps we could go together. Okay.
Via the internet, these uncanny interactions span thousands of miles and several time zones, yet the feeling of co-presence and of occupying the same space is highly defined. The sense of cybernetic touch is something that delights audiences and leads to some moments of real contact and intimacy. The piece explores how the presence of a virtual body in front of us elicits our desire and will for an intimate encounter. It emphasizes our increasingly cybernetic ontology, the ever ephemeral status of the human being, and our constant quest for communion with others, what existentialism terms being for others. As Sartre put it, quote, "I am for others. The other is revealed to me as the subject for whom I am an object." For cyberneticians and existentialists, the concrete approaches to being are defined by relationships with others, with wider networks and systems in cybernetics, and with other human beings in existentialism. This is a collaboration between robotics artist Louis-Philippe Demers and the Australian Dance Theatre. The performance dramatises a new type of ecology. It depicts an evolution of both humans and machines, and I think it dramatically encapsulates how performance is developing technologically. The humans go back to primitive states, a reverse evolution, while the machines become dancing life forms. Later, the humans fuse with the robots and sprout cybernetic appendages. Demers demonstrates the symbiosis between the metallic and the flesh, showing the profound humane nature of the machine and the profound machinic nature of humans. I've looked at correspondences between the work of artist Francis Alÿs and dramatist Samuel Beckett in relation to cybernetic notions of circularity and existentialist idea of the eternal return. This concerns our propensity to endlessly repeat the same actions or mistakes, which is vividly encapsulated in both Alÿs's and Beckett's works. Alÿs's The Rehearsal, we can see here, involves an eternal return in the form of a car's 33 failed attempts to get up a hill. Here, I've speeded it up, it's just in normal speed. It mirrors ideas in existentialist Albert Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus, about the mythological figure condemned to push a huge boulder up a hill only to watch it roll down again. It also echoes the futile repetitions in Beckett's plays and his famous maxim, try again, fail better. Camus' ideas on the absurd are explicit in Beckett's plays as well as in Francis Alÿs's performance actions. Here he pushes a block of ice around Mexico City until it melts. His looped animation of a man tripping over a dog's tail is another tragicomic tale of life's cruel absurdity. The repetitions of Beckett and Alÿs's work also locate them firmly within the system's circularity of cybernetics. I've also looked at popular culture. There we see a renewed interest in the classic existentialist anti-hero, an alienated nonconformist who breaks rules and attempts to live an authentic life in the extreme. Breaking Bad's protagonist Walter White is arguably the most overt embodiment of the existentialist outsider since Albert Camus' novel entitled The Outsider.
Now, say my name.
He's also a visionary cybernetician, synthesizing drugs of miraculous purity and establishing a labyrinthine underground crime network.
This is not myth.
But such anti-heroes and heroines are not confined to dark dramas of crime, drugs, and death. In 2013, the Walt Disney children's film Frozen broke all records to become the most successful animated film of all time. Its central set-piece sequence, Let It Go, is pure cybernetic existentialism. Filled with existential angst and having repressed her powers and authentic self for years, Elsa sings about being like a queen in a kingdom of isolation. She will now reject her past, cast off all her controlling fears without a care for what others think, and go and reach the extreme limits of her potential. Echoing the existentialist's total rejection of externally imposed codes and morals, she sings that from now on, for her, there will be no rules and no regard for what is right or wrong. I'm free, she declares, as she runs up a staircase that she simultaneously creates by emitting ice and snow from her body. As human being and nature make a magical cybernetic connection, her power radiates through the earth and sky. The cybernetic circuit evolves rapidly and reaches a climax as she conjures a magnificent palace of ice while describing her soul as spiraling in fractals. Now, if we read this via existentialism, she has taken a leap of faith, Soren Kierkegaard, to reach a point of existentialist self-creation, Simone de Beauvoir, whereby she is now condemned to freedom, Jean-Paul Sartre. She has committed herself to an authentic mode of being, Martin Heidegger, and to going beyond her limits, Friedrich Nietzsche. At the same time, she has reached new heights of cybernetic communication and control, Norbert Wiener, to become a post-human subject, which according to Catherine Hales is, quote, an amalgam entity whose boundaries undergo continuous construction and reconstruction. Now, Frozen wasn't just another children's film, but a huge cultural phenomenon, hitting a note that resounded loudly. It encapsulates a zeitgeist that I'm identifying through this research. It concerns self-creation of identity, freedom, authenticity, and making synthesizing connections that overflow normative boundaries, what I am defining as cybernetic existentialism. Finally, I'd like to offer the following table, which marries together the parallel themes and perspectives of cybernetics on the left and existentialism on the right. While their terminologies may differ, their ideas and spirits closely concur. The patterns of cybernetics and existentialism not only echo one another, but also resonate loudly with many of contemporary art's most pressing themes. They include present and future ecologies and evolutionary turns, and both disciplines have deep ecological roots. Both emphasize that everything is intimately connected and inextricably interwoven. Every action prompts a reaction, and the interrelationships between people and their environments are profound. Both fields emphasize change and transformation, with cybernetics fundamentally concerned with ecologies that are self-adjusting and self-regulating. Existentialism focuses on personal freedom and, crucially with it, responsibility. Writers such as J. Ogilvy have noted how, quote, the import of existentialism for the environmental movement lies in the hope for significant change. Existentialists are blessed with immense plasticity. Since your existence and your free choices precede and determine your essence, we can conduct our affairs in ways that positively affect environmental change and leave us living lighter on the earth, end quote. My theory of cybernetic existentialism celebrates and reanimates the ideas of these important but largely forgotten fields. It fuses their ideas to offer a new bifocal lens that reveals surprising new perspectives on and interpretations of contemporary arts and culture. Thank you.